crazy.
Okay, let me pop you out.
Gonna pop me out.
I'm gonna pop your pussy.
The fuck is wrong with you?
Let me find where we left off. Right, okay. What else happened in that chapter, though?
Dude, you can't really tell, but I'm getting so much chin hair,
You've sent
and I have
pictures, and
to.
I've seen it.
It's gotten like crazy.
Bro, even I
Um,
have, like, a lot of stubble recently.
I know, but this isn't even stubble anymore. It's like actively.
Nice. Your
The problem
Guido is
is,
kicking him.
yeah, the problem is that I have to. Fuck it. Can you stop jumping up in front of my screen? Um, I have to figure out how to shave, like for
Okay.
real.
I just used my... You know what? I
Well,
won't say.
yes, but I can't do that anymore. Like it's gonna come back thicker, and I have to be on top of that shit.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, do you remember what happened last time?
No,
Okay.
no.
Huacheng, Shilian, Mingyi, Shi Qingxuan. They're at Puchi
Uh huh.
Shrine.
Yeah.
Shi Qingxuan's being targeted, like we learned their lore. They're being targeted by this thing called the Reverend of Empty Words. They end up going. Mingyi draws an array on the door. They go through the
Uh huh.
door. Okay, Mingyi is like the Earth god, so he's like really good at teleportation spells and stuff. So they go through the door, but they don't end up at the destination that they're trying to go to. They end up in this town, right?
Uh huh.
They end up in this temple that's dedicated to the of Lords of Wind and Water, which is Xu Jingxuan and their brother. And it's like desecrated, which is like so weird because the Lord of Water is like he's also in charge of money, so like he's super popular, and it like no one would like just desecrate a temple to money.
Yeah.
So they end up there. They're like super freaked out. They're figuring like how the hell could we end up here? This is impossible. And Shilian eventually deduces. Wachung starts like messing with them and like blaming everybody in the room. But um, Shilian eventually deduces that if someone on the other side of the door had also drawn like an array and like fucked it up for them, then that could have like changed where they were teleported. So it's possible.
Hmm.
So they end up in this town, and then there's a festival. I forget specifically what it was called, but there's like a festival, and it's like a local festival for just this town. And they check in at this hotel, and they're like, "Are you here for the festival?" And they're like, "No, what festival?" And so hear they hear like someone shouting, like women and children stand back, back away, the troops are coming, and then all these people in makeup with like axes and tongs and scissors sticking out of them were marching around.
This happened.
Yeah, this happened. At the end, there's like a parade of people with um, bizarre costumes, axes, butcher knives, iron tongs, scissors, implements both sharp and dull. All were deeply buried in their skulls, piercing their brains. Some even had their eyeballs squeezed from their bleeding sockets and dangling down their cheeks. Some had been stabbed all the way through their foreheads, and the weapon jutted out the backs of their heads in an exceedingly gory display. Every one of the paraders had tightly knit brows and expressions scrunched in agony, and every face was covered in blood. and yet they continued to march slowly forward amidst the trumpeting music like a procession of phantoms, and that's where we left off.
Was I
So,
high?
I don't remember. You were like playing Sims. You have ADHD. It was a while ago.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's what happened.
Okay.
It's a bit of a not like a lot is happening, so I understand forgetting it. All right. So we're on chapter 53. Gods and ghosts learn of the bloody fire social. Shilian sprang to his feet. Shi Qingchuan stomped a foot down on the table, rolling up his sleeves as if ready to charge right down there. However, Shilian hastily held him back. "It's nothing. Don't worry. Lord Windmaster, please calm down." Shi Qingchuan was quite alarmed. "Is it nothing? Their eyeballs got squeezed out." "It's nothing," Shilian reiterated. "What a rare opportunity. It's a bloody fire social." Shi Qingchuan quickly removed his foot from the table. "Bloody fire social? What's that?" The two sat back down, and Shilian explained. Different regions have different kinds of fire socials. A bloody fire social is a special type and extremely rare. I've only ever heard about them. I've never seen one in person. Since the performances are gruesome and unusual, the makeup artistry is a trade secret. There are fewer and fewer of them every year. Shi Qingchuan was astonished. "Makeup? It's all fake? It's just too real. Here I thought it was the work of some sort of evil magic." What he said was no exaggeration, and Shilian sighed in awe as well. There are some extraordinarily talented people in the world. Not only did the performers in the parade have weapons deeply embedded in their skulls, but some also had exposed innards and missing limbs, and they crawled on the ground, crying and howling. A few were carrying a large wooden frame, and a woman was hanged by her neck from one of the beams. Two performers marched while dragging a woman by her legs. The woman's clothes had been torn to rags, and she left a long trail of blood as her face was scraped against the road. It was truly a realistic vision of hell. Even though it was a performance by humans, it was more horrifying than the ghosts of Ghost City. In comparison, Ghost City was practically an ordinary, bustling human market. Just how had all of that makeup been done? Shilian knew of the tradition, but he'd also thought it was a procession of evil at first glance. There were quite a few women and children who tried to squeeze to the front of the crowd to watch out of curiosity, but they screamed in fright and backed away when they actually caught a glimpse. "Your Highness, didn't you say that the point of fire socials was to celebrate? Who celebrates like this?" Shi Qingchuan commented. "People are running scared, and those little girls are going to have nightmares. Do people really have fun watching performances like these?" It really was hard to tell whether people enjoyed watching such performances, but in truth, slaughter and the sight of blood did get people excited. A rush of adrenaline would wash over them after the initial shock wore off, regardless of whether they felt true terror. It seemed like there was another name for the bloody fire socials in the local district: stabbing ecstasy. That meant that when a person was violently stabbed to death, the heart in that moment would be filled with ecstasy. At least, that was how Shilian understood the phrase. The lust for slaughter ran deep in the heart of humans. Of course, Shilian didn't voice these thoughts on the subject, and only watched the spectacle intently for a while. In that impressive parade there was a pale-faced man dressed in black, tall but skinny as a twig. Knife in hand, he struck at the head of one of the lavishly dressed performers and plunged the weapon deep into their skull. Next, he took out a long spear and used it to skewer the other performer and hoist them up to hang in the air. It was cruel and gruesome, almost like there was a real murder happening right before them. The crowd screamed in horror, though some also cheered. "I'm guessing they're acting out a story," Shilian said. "The black-clad man should be the protagonist, and the people he's killing should be the antagonists, the villains. The story tells of the defeat of evil and the triumph of good." Having said that, something clicked in Shilian's mind. "Lord Windmaster, watch closely." "I am watching," Shi Qingchuan said. "No, I'm telling you to watch for the story," Shilian explained. "Watch for the characters they're performing and the kind of story they're telling. There must be a reason why the Reverend of Empty Words brought you here and picked today of all days. Maybe it was so you'd watch this bloody fire social." The black-clad man's brow was deeply furrowed, and it looked like he was drowning in grave misery. as he single-handedly butchered hundreds of villains. He was also stabbed all over his body by all sorts of weapons. At the end, he dragged along a number of mangled corpses with white bandages around their throats, and then he lowered his head and moved no more. Surprisingly, the ending was one where everyone perished together. As one troop went past, another troop followed and performed the tale again. The parade cycled endlessly like this. Oh god, and then there's a picture. It's an insane drawing, what the fuck?
Oh, ooh.
Have you figured out what the story is about? Shilian asked. Shi Chuan knitted his brows. No, I don't think I understand. He's doing nothing but killing people. Next to Shilian, Hua Cheng said leisurely, I imagine it's not a widely known story. Ask a local and see if it's about someone renowned from the area. Coincidentally, the waiter came by again to bring their orders. Honored guests, how's the show? Is it exciting? It's good, very exciting, Shilian responded. May I ask who the main character of this bloody fire social performance is? Sure enough, the waiter said, Oh, outsiders don't know and always have to ask. Our town Fugu's fire social tells a tale that was once passed down through the word of mouth alone, starring a character from local legend. Many centuries ago, there was a scholar with the surname He. Although this scholar He's family was very, very poor, he was a talented man. Since his youth, he was frighteningly intelligent and picked up things quickly and expertly. He was also widely known as a good son. There was really nothing bad to say about the guy in any respect. Unfortunately for him, he was also very unlucky. For him, nothing good ever lasted. When he studied and took the state exam, even though he got the highest marks of them all, he offended the officials because he didn't give a gift to the examiner. They hid his test scrolls and exchanged them for blank ones, so for years he couldn't land a rank. When he got engaged, it was to his childhood friend. She was beautiful like a flower, kind and compassionate, but both his fiancée and his little sister were forcibly taken by a wealthy household to serve as the lowest kind of concubines. One wouldn't obey and was beaten to death. The other couldn't bear the shame and committed suicide. Scholar He went to seek justice, but those criminals accused him of committing adultery. He was locked up in jail and almost died of starvation there. His old ma and pa, both over 70 years old, kowtowed an entire night to beg for him to be shown mercy, but it was no use, and he rotted in jail for 2 years. His mom had no one to take care of her, and was long dead from illness when he finally got out. His dad had to labor for the family by himself, and was hanging on by a thread. Scholar He was forced to abandon his scholarly pursuits and went into business instead. But he was too good at it, and the other merchants ganged up to suppress him. All the money he made was fleeced away, and instead he drowned in debt. So what do y'all think? The waiter sighed aloud. How could anyone be so unlucky? Shilian cleared his throat quietly and agreed earnestly. Yeah. How could someone other than Shilian be that unlucky? After that brief lamentation, the waiter was radiant with cheer as he continued the tale. And then, one fateful night, the guy went crazy, just completely mad. On the eve of Hanlu, he grabbed a bunch of sharp tools and butchered everyone who had ever caused him harm. It was a bloody sight, I tell you. Flesh and gore flying everywhere. He hacked them all to tiny bits. Since everyone he killed had been bullying the town's citizens for ages, everyone cheered for him. So that's why the town commemorates him with a bloody fire social every year on the eve of Hanlu. Pray Lord Scholar He watches over us and slaughters the wicked. Supposedly, evil had been defeated and good had triumphed, but it seemed like it still didn't end well. After the waiter left, Shilian noticed that Shi Chuan seemed contemplative. Lord Windmaster, do you have any thoughts? Shilian asked. Shi Chuan snapped out of it. Some baffling thoughts, but they're too confusing, so I can't exactly explain. What about you, Your Highness? Hold on, I gotta let Venus out. about you, Your Highness. I was wondering if that Scholar He could have been the previous incarnation of the Reverend of Empty Words. As they spoke, another troupe started performing the same story again. Shi Jingchuan looked over. Its previous incarnation? That's right, Shilian said. Spirits and monsters that resemble humans are usually born from extreme cases of human resentment or obsession. For example, I've heard of a monster in Dongying that was formed from the resentment of women. It's called the Bridge Princess. Some say it was born from the grief of women who waited for husbands who never returned, and others say it was the madness of jealousy. If the Reverend of Empty Words was born of someone plagued by misfortune, one could say that it was formed by that person's jealousy of another's good fortune, or their hatred of their own unfortunate fate. Investigate the local history. The timeline needs to be verified, Mingyi said. Right, we need to investigate, Shilian said. To determine whether their theory was true, they had to investigate when the Scholar He character first appeared in these tales. If he first appeared after the earliest records of the Reverend of Empty Words, then their theory didn't hold. Shi Jingchuan nodded. After a moment's thought, he continued, There's one small thing. Suddenly, a voice laughed heartily from the crowd below. Just wait! Your closest family, your best friend, they'll all die a disgraceful death because of you. Shi Jingchuan's face immediately changed when he heard. He slapped the table and pushed off, leaping out the window of the restaurant and soaring through the air as light as a feather. The voice had come from the parading crowd. Lord Windmaster, come back! Shilian yelled from the building's upper floor. Shi Jingchuan landed in the crowd of bloodied living dead. Come the hell out, he raged. Come out! However, the performers all bore wooden expressions. They ignored him completely and continued to march as though sleepwalking. Shi Jingchuan was shoved around by the crowd as they flowed past him. He couldn't decide who among them was the most suspicious. He saw one that looked dubious, but just as he was about to strike with his Windmaster fan, he spotted another who looked even more suspect. If his aim was not true, there would be a life on his hands. Hua Cheng hadn't touched his vegetables, and he pushed them down on his plate to form a smiley face. He never looked up once. It's pointless. It's too easy for a 1,000-year-old monster to hide its tracks. It would be simple for something inhuman to infiltrate this particular parade, and the venerables of Empty Words already commonly took on a human form. It would be child's play for the Reverend, who was the strongest of them all. A moment later, Mingyi jumped down too, and pulled Shi Jingchuan out of the crowd. The group left the restaurant on the main street and walked towards the Temple of Wind and Water. Shi Jingchuan gripped his Windmaster fan with a still trembling hand, but the trembling now seemed like it was from anger rather than his initial fear. He dangled a small wine jug from the restaurant from his other hand. After walking for a while, he tossed back the jug and took a drink, and the seething redness in his eyes finally faded away. Ming Shang, maybe you shouldn't be my best friend for the time being. Wait till I've killed that thing first. Mingyi, however, replied, without a trace of restraint. Who's your best friend? I've never been. Shi Jingchuan took a moment to process, then his expression turned to outrage. Ming Shang, that's too much! Don't turn your back on people so quickly when things get tough! They were off once again, bickering away. Shilian shook his head and fished out 2 small items from his sleeve. Here, Lord Windmaster, I think you'd best use these after all. Shi Jingchuan took them. Earplugs? Shilian nodded. The idea might be silly, and it doesn't address the root problem, but it'll work for the time being. The creature can't do anything to you if you can't hear it. I made a new group communication array. The verbal password is by heaven officials' blessings, no paths are bound. If we need to talk to you, let's do it in the array. Sure enough, Shi Jingchuan could hear nothing after stuffing in the earplugs. One after the other, the 4 entered the array. All of a sudden, Shilian heard Hua Cheng's voice calling softly next to his ear. Guga, Guga. Shilian looked over and saw Hua Cheng pointedly blinking at him. His lips weren't moving, but his voice was still resounding in his ear. Didn't you say you wanted to talk to me? You won't come to me, so I have no choice but to come to you. Shilian grinned. It's your fault for setting that as your password. Fine, fine, my bad, Hua Cheng acquiesced. Shi Qingxuan adjusted the earplugs and saw the two of them staring at each other, smiling, without saying a word. Your Highness, Crimson Rain-Sought Flower, what are the two of you doing? He asked in the communication array, puzzled. Did you exchange verbal passwords, and now you're exchanging secrets? Julian softly cleared his throat and deadpanned in the communication array. Nothing of the sort. Hua Cheng raised his brows slightly and passed him another message. You liar. Julian stumbled in his step. Looking straight ahead as he walked and keeping an equally straight face, he replied, Sun Long, stop teasing me. I need you to help me with something. The two of them walked side by side, not looking at each other. What is it? Hua Cheng asked. Work with me to test whether a certain someone is the Reverend of Empty Words. Can I read another one?
Sure.
Okay, I have to feed Scout first real quick. But I'll
Okay.
be right back. Okay, I'm back, Smooky.
Sorry.
My Smooky. My Schnookums.
Okay.
You hate me.
Hold on, they're performing Anal Virgin.
Okay.
Don't
Anal
worry
virgin.
about it. They did it out of their own desire. It wasn't
That's
me who set
awesome.
it up.
I'm proud of
So-
them.
I'm also proud of them. Continue.
Alright. Chapter 54. In the Temple of Wind and Water, Night chattered to discern the truth. Hua Cheng turned around upon hearing this, and his gaze fell on Shi Qingxuan and Ming Yi, who were strangling each other behind them. He gestured at one of the two. Him? Julian nodded. How do you want to test this? Hua Cheng asked. Many years ago, I encountered two venerables of empty words, and one even clung on to me for over half a year, Julian replied. During that period, I tried worming information out of them and discovered a unique quirk they have. They didn't realize they were doing it, so they can be easily identified with just a bit of effort. Julian then passed on the secret. Once Hua Cheng heard, he said, That's easy. Let's do it like this. Just as the pair finished their discussion, they arrived on the broken-down Temple of Wind and Water. The autumn air was slightly chilly, and the skies were dim. Shi Qingxuan searched all over for the head of his brother's divine statue, and secured it back in place. He righted the two statues and placed them properly on the altar anew. Meanwhile, Julian started a small campfire using rotten logs he collected from around the temple, and the four sat around the fire. Shi Qingxuan's ears remained plugged. He petulantly drank a few swigs from his wine jug, and he finally couldn't sit still anymore. We can't possibly sit around like this, just waiting for that thing to show up. Is there anything we can do for entertainment? He brought it up first, just as Julian wanted. Ming-Yi poked to the fire. You can still think of entertainment at a time like this? It's important, Shi Qingxuan spat. That thing wants me scared? Well, I ain't scared. This Windmaster will play as happily as he pleases. Happier than ever before. It'll be like New Year's. I hope it dies from frustration. In the communication array, Shilian suggested, why don't we roll some dice? Shi Qingxuan pulled a long face. Dice? Betting on whose roll will be lower or higher again? Your Highness, you're not addicted, are you? What? No, Shilian denied. Never mind, there's nothing else around anyway. Dice it is. But there's 4 of us here. Won't things get a little confusing? It won't. Here, Shilian said. He opened his palm and revealed 2 small, exquisite dice. The 4 of us can split into 2 teams, Shilian explained. San Long and I will be one team. My lords can be the other. We'll compete to see who has better luck. With 2 dice, each team gets 1 turn, and each person rolls 1 die. Then we add up the rolls of that turn. If a team's roll is bigger, they win, and they can ask any question that the losing team must answer. Or they can have them do something instead. I have a question, Shi Qingxuan asked. Go ahead, Shilian replied. Shi Qingxuan jiggled his leg impatiently as he spoke. Why are the 2 of you so naturally paired together? Did you take our feelings into consideration when you divided the teams? Shilian softly cleared his throat. Well, if you want to switch up the teams, that's fine too. It makes no difference. Shi Qingxuan stuffed his whisk into the back collar of his outer robe. It's fine. I don't actually have any complaints about the team split. But Crimson Rain-Sought Flower has such good luck. Won't my team be at a disadvantage? Shilian cheerfully smiled at him. That's not entirely true. San Long might be extremely lucky, but my luck is extremely bad. With the 2 of us together, 1 good, 1 bad, don't we cancel each other out? That did make sense when Shi Qingxuan thought about it, so he smacked his thigh and exclaimed, Good! Let's have at it! Then he elbowed Ming-Yi. Ming-Shang, did you hear the rules? Don't drag me down, all right? Ming-Yi gave him a look, and his callous voice came through the spiritual communication array. Forgive me, but I won't be joining you. Shi Qingxuan hastily backtracked. It's okay if you drag me down. Never mind. Come. Just play. It'll be too sad for me to be on a team all by myself. Thus, the 4 swore a simple oath to follow the rules and started playing. In the first round, Shi Qingxuan rolled a 5, Ming-Yi rolled a 4, Huacheng rolled a 6, and Shilian rolled a 1. Shi Qingxuan was overjoyed and dissolved into laughter. Ha 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 ha! Your Highness, your luck really is bad. So bad! Shilian rubbed his forehead and said gently, Although what the Lord Windmaster says is true, can you not say it with such glee? Fine, so our team won. This Windmaster will tell you 2 to do something, Shi Qingxuan said. So, Your Highness, and Crimson Rain-Sought Flower, I order you to strip off each other's clothing. Shilian was first speechless, then alarmed. Lord Windmaster? Ming-Yi turned around with obvious disgust, and his hand covered his face like he wanted to shield himself from having to witness this terrible joke. Shi Qingxuan, on the other hand, was hollering, Come, don't be sore losers. An esteemed heavenly official and an esteemed ghost king. You won't back out now, right? Your audience is seated, so please start the show. Shilian looked at Huacheng, and Huacheng shrugged helplessly, mouthing the words, Gaga, it's not my fault. Feeling helpless as well, Shilian could only ask, How much do we strip? Shi Qingxuan was only playing around. He wasn't actually trying to embarrass them. He laughed and gleefully jiggled his legs. Just 1 layer is fine. Keep a few on for later. He actually wanted to keep this going. Shilian hesitated and secretly whispered into their private communication array, San Long. Huacheng's face showed no reaction, but his voice next to Shilian's ear comforted him, sounding earnest. Don't worry. Didn't we agree to let them win a few rounds? They'll lose eventually. That was indeed something they had agreed upon, but Shilian hadn't expected Shi Qingxuan to play like this, and he felt like he was shooting himself in the foot. He reluctantly shuffled over to untie Huacheng's belt, and it took him a while to remove Huacheng's black outer robe and reveal the snow-white inner tunic. Hua Cheng also helped him out of his outer robe, looking as calm as he always did. His hands were slow and gentle, and he carefully avoided touching any part of Shilian's body. The two of them only removed their outer robes. It was nothing extraordinary, and nothing unseemly, but Shilian still felt extremely weird. And then there's a picture. Insane fucking.
What do you mean there's a picture?
The picture of stripping.
No. What's this?
Whoa!
Whoa!
After assuming a proper sitting position, he stammered, Again. The second round, Shi Qingxuan rolled a 3, Ming Yi a 6, Hua Cheng rolled a 6 once again, and Shilian still rolled a 1. Shi Qingxuan pounded the ground, laughing uproariously. Shilian looked to Hua Cheng again and spoke through their private communication array. San Long! This was not what they agreed upon. Hua Cheng apologized profusely. Sorry, I forgot. Don't be mad, Guga. It's my fault this time. Shi Qingxuan cheered once more, rolling up his sleeves. All right, this round, I order you to... Stop! Shilian hurriedly cut in. Last round was a request. We did it and stripped. This round should be questions. Shi Qingxuan laughed heartily. Ask questions? That's fine too. Then here's my first question. Crimson Rain sought flower. To you, what's the worst suffering in the world? Hua Cheng's smile suddenly faded, and silence settled in the Temple of Wind and Water. Don't misunderstand, Shi Qingxuan added. I don't mean anything by it. I'm honestly just curious. Is there really anything that can cause pain to someone who's made it to the position of a ghost king like you? Crimson Rain sought flower. Maybe there isn't anything? What do you think? Hua Cheng asked back. Shi Qingxuan pondered for a moment before making his guess. The city of Gu at Mount Tonglu? There were many who'd suggest that answer when they considered the question. However, Hua Cheng only smiled faintly. That's nothing to fear. Shi Qingxuan was amazed. That's not it? Then what is it? Hua Cheng's lips curled, but the curve soon disappeared. I'll tell you what it is, he said softly. Watching your beloved be trampled and ridiculed with your own eyes, and being unable to do a thing about it. You understand that you are nothing, and you can do nothing. That's the worst suffering in the world. Shilian's breathing stopped as he listened with rapt attention. Not a single soul spoke in the rundown Temple of Wind and Water. Shi Qingxuan couldn't think of anything to say for the longest time, until he finally managed to squeeze out, Oh. Ming Yi's face remained sullen as he poked at the fire. Continue. Shi Qingxuan scratched his head and waved. I'm done. Ming Shang, you asked something. Ming Yi glanced up and stared at Shilian. Your Highness? Shilian snapped out of it. What's the biggest regret of your life? Ming Yi asked. Ming Yi was unusually quiet and spoke little, but when he finally opened his mouth, he unexpectedly asked a question of such weight. Shilian was floored. Was it his disregard of advice and warnings, and his insistent and illegal descent to the mortal realm? Was it his hubris in thinking himself powerful enough to create rain for Yang'an? Was it his wishful thinking that he could save Shenle? Or was it his reluctance to kill certain people? He knew it was none of that. It took a moment for Shilian to answer. My second ascension. The other three in the temple looked at him unspeaking. Shilian seemed lost in his thoughts, and it was a while before he came back to himself. What is it? Everyone, I've answered the question. It's nothing. Let's continue, Hua Cheng said quietly. The third round, Shi Qingxuan rolled a 2, Ming Yi a 2, Hua Cheng rolled a 6, and Shilian a 1. Seeing this, Shilian let out a huge sigh of relief. By the heaven officials' blessings, they'd finally won. It was now the other team's turn to be punished, but Shi Qingxuan was eager and clearly afraid of nothing. Come at me! Hit me with your best shot! Shilian smiled. Then I will. Lord Earthmaster, you first. He turned to Ming Yi. My lord, please answer the questions I'm about to ask properly, and please don't lie. Ming Yi didn't say anything, and Shi Qingxuan waved dismissively. Don't worry, Ming Shang doesn't even know how to lie. Shilian grinned. Very well. First question. Who am I? Shi Qingxuan was flabbergasted. Your Highness, what kind of question is that? Aren't you... you? Who else could you be? Ming-Yi slowly raised his head and met Shilian's eyes. The crown prince of the kingdom of Shenle, Shilian. Shilian nodded and then asked, Second question. Who's the one sitting next to me? Ming-Yi paused briefly, then answered, The Lord of Ghost City, Crimson Rain-Sought Flower. Shilian then asked, The last question. Who's the one sitting next to you? Shi Qingxuan was growing more and more puzzled. Your Highness, what are you two playing at? Who am I? I'm the Windmaster. Lord Earthmaster, please answer, Shilian pressed. This time, Ming-Yi didn't reply as quickly. Because he had run into Venerables of Empty Words on several occasions, Shilian had discovered a fascinating quirk of their kind. When Venerables of Empty Words spoke, at least one of every 3 sentences would be a lie. This unique quirk could be compared to how a normal human being needs to drink water lest they die from dehydration, no matter how healthy or strong they are otherwise. It was an unchangeable truth regardless of one's ability, unless they ascended and left their humanity behind. The teleportation array had been drawn by Ming-Yi, and he was also the last one out the door. If meddling was afoot, he had the most chances to do it. Of course, Shilian suspected him from the start. But Shi Qingxuan was upset at the time, and if Shilian voiced his suspicion, it would no doubt distress Shi Qingxuan further. This would allow the Reverend of Empty Words to suck more negative emotions from him, fueling its power. And so, at the time, Shilian quickly came up with other possibilities, but he had never given up on the most straightforward one. The Windmaster and the Earthmaster had a very good relationship, so it's impossible for the Windmaster not to notice if the Reverend of Empty Words was impersonating the Earthmaster. But what if the Reverend was covertly possessing Ming-Yi? This was why he'd wanted Huacheng to work with him to worm out Ming-Yi's words by way of an ordinary conversation. But Huacheng had pointed out it would be unnatural for the two of them to try to rope Ming-Yi in like that, since they'd never really conversed in the past. Why not use the pretense of a game to create an opportunity? They could make Ming-Yi talk and see if they could observe anything of interest without the Windmaster or Earthmaster noticing. But Ming-Yi had always been a man of few words. Even in a high-energy atmosphere, he spoke sparingly. Shilian paid close attention to everything he said earlier in the game, but it was all vague. Nothing that could be pinned down as true or false. In the end, he had to use his trump card. He borrowed Huacheng's power and secretly controlled the dice to make Ming-Yi lose. Presented with 3 questions, Ming-Yi would have no choice but to answer on the spot. Because they were playing a game, Shi Qingxuan wouldn't realize anything was amiss. He would assume they were still joking around. Thus, the Reverend of Empty Words couldn't use the opportunity to sneak in and suck out his power. And should Ming-Yi answer wrong, Shilian would seize him the moment he slipped. A creature like the Venerable of Empty Words would always lie within 3 sentences, and Shilian had asked 2 questions that Ming-Yi had answered honestly. If Ming-Yi was the Reverend of Empty Words, he would no doubt answer the last question with a lie. Should he choose, Ming-Yi could easily answer vaguely or pretend he was making a joke. However, he had answered the first 2 questions simply and succinctly without any such tricks, so the last answer had to be the same. It would otherwise be out of character, which would also prove he was suspect. Shilian and Ming-Yi calmly stared at each other. A moment later, Ming-Yi finally spoke. His tone was no different from his last 2 answers. One of the 5 elemental masters, the younger brother of the water master Wudu, the wind master Qingxuan. Shi Qingxuan shook his head and sighed. Why the hell didn't you say my best friend? Ming-Yi glanced at him. Who's that? Shilian silently blew out a breath. Although the Reverend of Empty Words was called Reverend, it wasn't a real man of the cloth with any holy spirituality. As long as it remained classified as a nefarious creature, it would never be able to escape the unique quirks of its kind. 3 sentences had been spoken, and all 3 were undoubtedly true. It seemed there was nothing amiss with Ming-Yi, unless Shi Wudu and Shi Qingxuan weren't real brothers, but such an unbelievably shocking turn of events shouldn't be possible. Before he fully exhaled, Ming-Yi's hand shot out, grabbing straight for Shilian's throat. Shilian and Huacheng both moved to fend off his hand at the same time. 3 hands flew as fast as lightning, and the energy was so intense it made Shi Qingxuan leap to his feet. Ming-Shang, what are you doing? Ming-Yi glared at Shilian intently, his voice dark. You asked 3 questions, but in the last round I only asked 1. Shulian smiled. Lord Earthmaster, please think back on the rules carefully. I never said you could only ask 1 question per round. Very well, Ming-Yi said. Then I'll add to my question. Who are you? Didn't you already answer that question yourself? Shulian asked. Perhaps I answered wrong, Ming-Yi replied. If not, will His Highness please explain why he set up this game so suddenly, and his reason for asking such strange questions? Lord Ghost King is skilled in the art of luck manipulation, but it seems unnecessary to waste such talent on petty entertainment. Huacheng laughed. Well now, if I feel like it, I'll use it however I want. It must be understood that while Shulian and Huacheng saw Ming-Yi as suspicious, Ming-Yi thought them equally suspicious. From the moment Ming-Yi struck, they had been speaking aloud rather than using the communication array. Shi Qingxuan didn't know what they were arguing about, but he didn't dare remove his earplugs rashly, and could only attempt to intervene. Stop, stop, stop! I order you all to stop right now and tell me what happened, or else I'm gonna butt in too. He flashed open his Windmaster fan. Ming-Yi shoved him aside. Move! Stop adding to the trouble! Just then a blast of sinister wind blew from out of nowhere. The flames of the small campfire they were gathered around quivered and danced wildly with the gust. Silhouettes and shadows twisted and contorted with the firelight, making the 2 divine statues on the altar appear extremely unsettling, smiling but not, crying but not. Ming-Yi pulled Shi Qingxuan up. Something's here, he said warily. He had shoved Shi Qingxuan to the ground without warning, and he had pulled him up just as quickly. Shi Qingxuan was dizzy and seeing stars. Ming Shongs, can you please be nicer to me? No time, Ming-Yi said. Shulian had been watching the 2 statues and urged the others. Look at their eyes! The 4 looked over and saw that the smiling faces of the 2 divine statues were streaked with vivid red lines, their clay eyes streaming bloody tears. Divine statues which had been sanctified in ceremonies and worshipped by believers possessed a certain power to deter evil. Even if said evil didn't completely retreat, the statues still typically couldn't be defiled by inhuman hands. The Reverend of Empty Words was certainly powerful. Shi Qingxuan was here in the flesh, yet it made the statue of the Windmaster weep bloody tears before the god himself. The tears of blood streamed thicker and heavier, dripping to the ground and gathering in a twisted, complex form. Let me drink my water. Shi Qingxuan was bewildered. What is that thing? Is it drawing a picture? He couldn't figure out what shape was forming, no matter how he looked at it. He didn't move closer, but he tried to look at it from various angles to discern the image. Shulian snapped out of his shock to realize that it wasn't a drawing. It was an upside-down word. Don't look, he barked. It's written for you. Ming-Yi struck out with his palm. Boom! The blood-streaked ground and 2 divine statues were blasted to pieces. Shi Qingxuan's jaw dropped. Ming Shang, you can't let my brother know about this, or he'll never forgive you. To destroy a heavenly official's divine statue was an act of extreme disrespect, and today Ming-Yi had snapped an establishment plaque in half and then blasted 2 statues to bits. This was no different than crashing through someone's restaurant, smashing their signage, and then soundly slapping the owner in the face. If this got out, specifically if the person in question found out, they wouldn't sit back and do nothing. Who knew what kind of bloody storm would rise from it? As Shulian idly turned his head, he noticed that the broken plaque that they had set aside earlier in the day didn't seem quite right. The establishment plaque was painted blue, and had proper golden characters spelling the words Temple of Wind and Water. But now the strokes of the characters were twisting into bloody red shapes that appeared to be the beginning of the word death. In a flash, he covered Shi Qingxuan's eyes and yelled into the communication array, "Close your eyes!" "What now?" Shi Qingxuan shouted back. "Nothing. It's just the words on your establishment plaque have changed. The creature knows you can't hear it, so it's trying to write," Shulian explained. "Damn!" Shi Qingxuan exclaimed. "If I can't let myself hear or see anything, then aren't I both deaf and blind?" Shulian dropped his hands. "Don't worry. Just calm down. We're here for you." Ming-Yi grabbed hold of Shi Qingxuan's back collar and dragged him aside. Shi Qingxuan still had his eyes closed, and he put his palms together as if in prayer. How reassuring! Just as he spoke, an enormously noisy commotion came from outside the run-down temple. Dark blurs darted across Chilean's vision, and in the next moment there was a huge, rowdy crowd of people howling like devils and pouring inside like a pitch-black tide. It was a mob populated by all kinds of bizarre forms and monstrous shapes. Some had decapitated heads, some were hanged, some had large sabers piercing their skulls, some had their bellies cut open. There were all sorts of violent curiosities. Xi Jinchuan couldn't hear and couldn't see, but he could feel the disorderly, chaotic footsteps all around him. He was even pushed around in the ruckus. "What's going on?" he asked in the communication array, bewildered. "What's gotten inside? Why are there so many people?" "It's nothing major," Shilian said. "It's the night parade of the Bloody Fire Social. Let's just get out of here." In some places, Bloody Fire Socials would hold further entertainment well into the night after the day's parades had ended. Not only did the performers want to get their fill of scaring people, many common folks also had the urge to do the same, and so they would imitate the Bloody Fire Social's terrifying makeup and use the dark of night to head out and look for people to scare. Unfortunately, the four of them seemed to have run into such a group of night cruisers. The rowdy crowd of common folk didn't have the same level of realism in their makeup as the proper parade troops, but they were nevertheless formidable due to sheer numbers and terrifyingly obscured by the darkness of night. Quite the sight to behold. In towns that had such after-hours entertainment during Bloody Fire Socials, locals would lock up their homes tightly and stay indoors. These night cruisers had been wandering around for some time, and they were quite excited when they saw there were people inside the broken shrine, as if they'd spotted prey. Over 50 of them had charged in, overcrowding the small temple. The four of them were drowned in the pandemonium. Shilian kept looking back, but he could only see Huacheng, who was still next to him, and never more than 2 steps out of reach. The two were pushed several meters away. "Everyone, let's get outside now!" he shouted. But while some of the night cruisers were purely there for fun, others were small-time merchants, merchants there specifically to scam petty change from tourists who had come to watch the Bloody Fire Social. They blocked them inside, not letting them leave, and began to pester and cajole them. "Young masters, give us a tip! We worked so hard to dress up. If you had fun tonight, then give us a tip. Yeah, it ain't easy. This is only a once-a-year thing. If you don't tip us, watch out for the old ghost lord. He'll come haunt you." Since the whole affair had nothing to do with him, Huacheng only watched from the sidelines, and wasn't the least bit anxious. When he heard them, he laughed out loud. "I'd like to see what kind of ghosts dare come knocking at my door." As Shilian swept a look over the crowd, he saw a pale-faced, hanged ghost near the edge of the crowd. It was wrapping a rope around someone's neck while wearing an eerie grin. Let me drink. It was chaos all around. Everyone was covered in blood, their faces contorted, endlessly playing out games of "you kill me, I kill you, now you're dead, now I'm dead." People were constantly howling and falling over. It was hard to differentiate the real from the fake, but Julian's instincts told him that person wasn't right, and he threw out his arm. Royer flew forth and struck the hanged ghost squarely on the head. Sure enough, the hanged ghost wailed and turned into a wisp of black smoke, fleeing through a small crack in the ground. No one else noticed, but Shilian saw everything clearly. "Everyone, be careful! Something wicked is mixed in with the crowd," he warned in the communication array. There now seemed to be a faint ghost chi wafting within the Temple of Wind and Water. It wasn't from the Reverend of Empty Words, of course, but more likely some little minions that had snuck into the crowd at some point. When people play around and pretend to be ghosts, it doesn't take long to attract real ones. But for them to show up right now really was adding frost to snow. There were too many people and too much chaos in the temple. Heads knocking heads, feet stepping on feet, and it was too difficult to determine the exact source of the ghost chi. Shilian grabbed Huacheng and ran out of the Temple of Wind and Water. He was about to ask the others, but found he couldn't. His spiritual power was almost depleted, and with no power he couldn't enter the spiritual communication array. In that moment of urgency, he turned to Huacheng. "Sun Long, lend me a bit of spiritual power. I'll pay you back later." Of course, the promise of later payment was nonsense. He was never able to pay back any of the power he borrowed. "All right," Huacheng said, then reached out to hold Shilian's hand. Shilian felt a burst of warmth pass into his palm. At that moment, a few bloody individuals came rushing out of the temple in hot pursuit. The one straggling behind that group was dropping innards as he ran, and had skin that crawled with livor mortis. He also gave off a faint aura of ghost chi. Without thinking, Shulian shot a blast from his palm. A booming sound like an explosion was heard, and a blinding white light flashed. It took a while before Shulian realized what had happened. In the place where the ghost with the cut belly once stood, only a mound of black ash-like residue remained. As for the Temple of Wind and Water, the entire rooftop had been blown away. The rioting night cruisers in the temple had gone still, frozen in shock from the booming sound and blinding light. Julien raised his head to look at the Temple of Wind and Water. Now others. They lent very generously, but Julien had never experienced a feeling like this. Fucking OBS Studio, relax. Hello?
Hello?
Oh, your video is like cutting out. Is it my internet?
I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, then I'm gonna keep going. In the past, he had also borrowed spiritual power from Shi Qingxuan, Nanfang, and others. They lent very generously, but Shulian had never experienced a feeling like this, as if all the blood in his veins had turned into an electrical current that charged through his body. The powers he'd borrowed before had to be economized and saved. Only one bite taken at a time for fear of wasting them. Right now, he felt like he could eat a full bowl and dump out 10 without a care. The power Huacheng had passed to him was too great. It filled his entire body to bursting. It was to the point where Shulian was almost afraid to move, scared that with just a wave of his hand, something else nearby would explode. Now that their surroundings were temporarily calm, he hurriedly entered the communication array. "Lord Windmaster, where are you? I left the temple and I didn't see you." "Oh God," Shi Qingxuan groaned inside the communication array. "Your Highness, why is your voice so loud all of a sudden? I left the Temple of Wind and Water too." Shulian reined in his spiritual powers, then replied, "Sorry, I'm having some trouble controlling this. How did you leave? Are you all right?" After all, right now Shi Qingxuan had his ears plugged and his eyes closed. "Pfft, how else could I have left? Ming Shang pulled me out. Thank goodness I wasn't trampled to death by that crowd," Shi Qingxuan said. A moment later, Ming Yi's voice also sounded in the spiritual communication array. However, his words froze the smile that was just beginning to form on Shulian's face. "That wasn't me." "It wasn't?" Shulian snapped his head around. "Oh no." "Lord Windmaster, just who was it that pulled you away?" And that's where the chapter ends.
Oh boy.
Oh, goody! Ooh!
Oh goody.
I love Beef Leaf. I love how attached Shi Qingxuan is, and Mingyi's just like, I'm not your friend. That would be so embarrassing if I was your friend. You can't say that.
Friends. I don't know who you are.